Good morning. Welcome back to our ECRA Circle of Solidarity and Mourning. Nice to see you again. For everybody that will be watching on video, I'm Craig Morantz from Emmanuel Congregation. I'm pleased to be here with my good friends from ECRA, our community of faith, our fellowship of decent, good people ready to make a difference, trying to be a force for good. So we would start with reading in the Hebrew, Esa Enai El Harim, Me'ayin Yabo Ezri. Ezri Me'im Adonai Oseh Shemayim Ba'aretz. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Whence does my help come? My help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. Can you see my special screen now? So friends, I came across some wisdom from Brian S. Lowry. Dr. Lowry is a professor at Stanford University. And as you can see here, he's interested in social psychology. He's a leader at Stanford, and he participates in Stanford's Center on Poverty and Inequality. He was also trained at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, and he did his graduate work at UCLA. So he wrote an article recently in the Washington Post that I bring to bear here. And this is the headline. To my white friends, the time for talk has passed. Now is the time for work. The time for talk has passed. Now is the time for work. So what does that work look like? Well, it comes in a very large question with very few words. I don't know if you can see this wholly, but Jane, will you read this, please? The first question for my white friends is,
are you okay? The question I would pose to my white friends, are you okay? Are you okay after seeing a Minneapolis police officer casually pressing the life out of George Floyd? Are you okay after learning the police rushed in and shot Breonna Taylor, a woman not accused of wrongdoing, in her apartment? Are you okay after watching 3 white men chase and kill Ahmaud Arbery? Are you okay after watching an apparently liberal woman functionally weaponize her white kids in Central Park? I know that many feel terrible that such atrocities continue to happen. I don't know whether people understand that because they are white, they are subject to the same forces that produced Derek Chauvin, the officers in Kentucky, those men in Georgia, and Amy Cooper in New York.
so are you okay? I'm not okay. I'm not okay with any of this or any acts of violence, police, racial, a combination, or otherwise. for however long it's been happening. I'm not okay with it. The question is, what do we do if we're not okay with it? So, Fred, please reflect on Dr. Lowry's response to this question.
All right. Maybe you believe you have nothing in common with those people, that good intentions, tolerant uprisings, or enlightened parenting will protect against such corruption. Maybe you believe the diverse activism on display nationwide will make things right. But sincere concern and time have not fixed our problems. They are not enough to protect any of us from the influence of the malignant system we all live in. Recently from the Washington Post.
So the major question is, are you okay? Am I okay? And what are we going to do about it? I am not okay, but is it enough just to have good intentions? Or tolerant upbringings? Or enlightened parents? Or a commitment to diverse activism? If it's not okay, and these aren't enough, these strategies and tactics aren't enough, what are we going to do going forward? How are we going to protect ourselves and others from racism, systemic racism, that we, whether intentional or not, contribute to? I bring these questions to bear for us to think about them. If there is an answer or two that you have you want to talk about, we can talk about those answers. But it would appear that sincere concern and time spent with those concerns is not enough. I think that's clear.
Well, I think we have to do something together, right? Can never do it alone. Can't solve it all at once either. So we need to pick something. You know, definitely I think we have to learn to speak out about it, whether it's individually or in our where we're working, our congregations, our schools, or whatever. I think we need to do something together.
Reminds me of what Sister Mary Jean says all the time: things will take time. So Pastor Fred, you reaffirm that. That's going to take us time. And it's going to take us connecting with victims of racism.
Mm-hmm.
But so I've really been struggling with this idea that it's going to take time. I'm sure that you've seen Dr. King's quote about the one about that rioting is the voice of the unheard, but part of that same quote is about how part of what America hasn't heard is that too many white people are, and I'm paraphrasing horribly, are more focused. The phrase is that they're focused on tranquility and the status quo rather than on justice and humanity. And so that, I mean, that quote has been moving around inside of me. And that's from 1967. And yesterday, one of my sisters reminded us all, sent us all a photograph of a letter that my grandparents had received in 1960, in about this, at about the same time. I asked her actually for the date and did not get it, but in the 60s, that, you know, we needed to keep Park Ridge white. And my family had, you know, multi-generational, lived in Park Ridge before it became a bedroom community for the city. And just, I mean, that, like, time hasn't been enough. I mean, I remember when, like, an interracial couple had moved into Park Ridge in my childhood. And, like, I mean, it just, like, Park Ridge is still so much the same as whether in the 60s or in my childhood or today. Like, time isn't enough. And so I go back to the other part of that, of tranquility, that, you know, we want this chaos to be over. We want, and I guess in some respect, I think what I'm being drawn to, and my thoughts are not complete, but or my wrestling with this isn't complete, but I think it's that, like, we can't let ourselves be kind of drawn to the tranquility or to smoothing it over, or to, you know, kind of like the platitudes or what. I mean, we have to let ourselves be in this place of discomfort and let ourselves be challenged by this discomfort, so that this really is reckoned with, that it's not just something that then, you know, our children are going to be grappling with, you know, decades from now, as it continues to perpetuate. So sorry, I've spoken for a long time, but
No, this is important. It kind of brings us into a very clear understanding that sort of there's this inner tension, and it probably is a function of wanting tranquility, which is dangerous in the sense that it may soften the pursuit of justice, not on purpose, but in pursuit of peace and tranquility. But here, Jane, what I hear, Dr. Steinfeld's, what I hear is that time is not a strategy. It doesn't work by itself. Well, if we're patient enough, if we're perseverant enough, if we just wait long enough, that everything will smooth out. Dr. Lowry says, no, that's not enough. What I do think is this, borrowing from my Jewish tradition, there's a phrase, lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. You are not free to, you don't have to finish the task, but you're not free to desist from it. This suggests that there is a period of time and such a huge effort that one has to apply to making the world a better place. In this case, eliminating racism, championing anti-racism. It's going to take a lot of effort over time. And it may seem overwhelming, the job ahead of us. And it is, because we've waited so long to really address it more fully. As a collective, right? Certainly people have been championing anti-racism since it came about. That doesn't mean the rest of us have been championing it. And so we have to do what we can. We have to rely on each other to do what each other can. And collectively, we come together in pursuit.
We have to.
Black, white, all of us moving forward. This will take some level of time, but if it's time just spent sort of sitting around hoping that everything will work out, then time won't help us. If it's time spent motivating and getting involved and building proximate relationships across racial lines and letting those relationships evolve into trusting connections over time, because we're actively working on those relationships consistently throughout the days ahead, then I think time becomes a better ally, right? But we're using it to build relationships that will help us fight a malignant system that we all live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right.
I agree. Yeah, what was I going to say? But I agree that, yeah, time is, I remember back to the 60s too, and thinking, this is the time, and, my generation's going to make the change. And feeling later in the 70s and 80s that we just let it go and dropped the ball and became part of the system of what can benefit us, So, yeah, that's why I think we do need to remember we can't do it all at once, but I think we do have to model ourselves after the demonstrators right now too, that they're asking for everything, They want to defund the police, de-incarcerate the police, whatever. I want to talk more about that later in the week with my piece or whatever, but we need to have a demand, and we need to be part of that demand that asks for total bringing down of racism in our culture, starting with the police. And
Look,
so,
a revolutionary spirit, right?
right,
That's urgent.
the urgency, exactly. Yeah, you have to ask for everything because, when it comes to policy and politics, you often have to bargain somewhat, but your demand has to be clear and, everything you really want. And, when it comes to racism, in the end, it has to all be taken down. And that's a big demand. It's everywhere.
I think it will never be easy, but if we are a collective force, then it will make each individual effort a little more attainable. Of course, we can always make decisions and choices. So whether it's a big job or a massive job or an impossible job, each of us has to commit regardless, and to do the best we can and do even better than that. Because we don't really have time on our side. We've used a lot of time.
Right.
We don't want, oh, well, it'll take time. And I don't mean to be critical. I think there is a certain okay, let me get my bearings straight here. Let me figure out what I need to do. In part, that's true. We have to really think thoughtfully and take time to think thoughtfully. At the same time, it strikes me as a luxury, a moral luxury. Relative to the revolution, there's just not a lot of time. Not a lot of time where someone might not say, are you desisting? Are you, using time as a way of just smoothing things over, as you said, Jane? Right? And not really getting the work done that lies beneath that smooth surface.
And I guess, how do we make it relevant to everyone? I've been mystified by the things that take us so much time and the things that we manage to figure out in a shorter amount of time. I look at the LGBTQ plus movement, right? And the fact that progress was able to be made in relatively short order. Once things started moving, I guess. But I think part of it was that people's lives, and people recognized that it was somebody in their family who was affected. And I think like part of it is that this, like, we're not, I don't know, I don't have words, but I think like our role can be to like keep it uncomfortable and to let it be uncomfortable, and for us to make sure that the people in our circle, the people in our world, like when somebody hears defund the police and they dismiss it because it's just this crazy idea, that we can actually say, well, actually, let's talk about it. And these are the things that aren't being funded now because we've increased the funding for the police. And these are the, most police calls are because somebody's asleep on the train, or because, they're responding to issues of homelessness, or responding to issues of mental illness, or responding to things that have nothing to do with what we need police for.
Right.
And to be able for us to engage in those conversations and not let somebody in our hearing like brush that off, or just kind of dismiss a slogan because that slogan makes them uncomfortable, and for us to be uncomfortable with them. And I mean, I think that is probably, I think for me right at this minute, like that's probably the biggest thing that I can do, is every conversation that I have with every human being, like to make sure that we're all uncomfortable together.
I think this is one of the key things that we do, is we accept the discomfort and we accept the responsibility that comes with it to engage in conversations that truly turn things around, that question institutions, that question attitudes, that question assumptions, that question practices. That discomfort and the desire to work through it will enable us to expand beyond basic concern. It's one thing to say we're created in God's image, full of intrinsic worth. We can believe that, we can do our best to practice that, but when our reality doesn't really support that, the worry I have is such beautiful values become platitudes. And so sometimes recognizing that we're created in God's image and full of intrinsic worth means that we stand at attention when there are uncomfortable situations that reflect that we're not doing as well as we can in practicing this virtue, that it's too much of a platitude. It's not real enough for enough people. And no matter how committed we might be to that value, and no matter how long we've been committed to that value, for those who don't feel that, for those who feel marginalized, for those who feel victimized by racism, by our racism, what kind of partner are we really? Not as sincere as we may think. Even if we've been raised to be good, it's not enough. We have to dive into conversations that call to question the realities that people are living broadly. By the way, I think that by living in this discomfort is the best way to achieve some level of empathy. I say it often, as a white male, cisgender, I can hide in all sorts of hiding places built for people just like me. Any of these conversations I get too uncomfortable about, I can go hide somewhere. That is a problem. That's a problem. I can find comfort wherever I can find a hiding place. If I allow that to happen for myself, then I'm not going to be part of the solution. I'm going to be part of the problem. So this idea of staying uncomfortable, but acting through the discomfort, right? And connecting with others who are feeling uncomfortable. And then getting proximate with those who've been made to feel uncomfortable because of a malignant racist system. Will put us on a path to better resolution and hopefully reconciliation. Any other thoughts?
You have all day?
Yeah, really. Yeah. So I'm gonna move us forward here. Just listen, we're trying to meet on a regular basis as a way of building momentum, right? As much as I loved getting together with everyone for our solidarity service, our morning service, and as powerful and impactful as that moment was, I knew that our work would be
Yes.
aplenty the next day and the day after, and that the true measure of our commitment will be in consistent effort over time. And I'm really pleased and grateful to be here with you on a regular basis. And hopefully we can draw more people into our conversation so that we can get into this practice. That we can build a credibility because of our consistency over time. There's this power of saying a person's name. We know this in our Jewish tradition. For sure, we mention names before we say Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. And so here's a mural that captures the importance of saying a person's name, humanizing that person, memorializing that person, capturing something of that person's essence, right? A name, building a good name is very essential to a person's character and soul. And so we say their names. And you can say them with me. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, David
McAtee.
I haven't heard about David McAtee before I saw this mural. So we'll have to learn more about his life and how it mattered, because it did matter. You have to make his life and loss, and all these individuals' lives and losses matter by fighting racism and fighting against police brutality. We also remember others before them. Their lives mattered too. Michelle Cusseau, Akai Gurley, Matthew Ajibade, Philip White, Victor Manuel La Rosa, Freddie Carlos Gray Jr., Janet Wilson, David Joseph, Mary Trujillo, Willie Tillman. The list feels endless, and so too does our despair. But just as we draw comfort from the Psalms, we also draw greater dedication to be a force for healing. We will not stand idly by. And so to conclude our service today, I take us to the 121st Psalm. Let us lift our eyes to the mountains. If you'd like, you can join me. A song for ascents. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from the eternal, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The eternal is your guardian. The eternal is your protection at your right hand. By day, the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. The eternal will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. The eternal will guard your going and coming now and forever.
Amen.
Amen. I find this psalm is comforting, but it's challenging, because we live in a world where, as St. Augustine talks about, God hears and answers prayers, at least we hope, right? But at the same time, if we are going to sit around and rely on God to see us through, no matter how noble such an intentionality might be, if we don't act as though everything depends on us, then are we going to act with the proper urgency? Are we going to act with the proper intentionality that's suddenly just going to be a function of God's grace and inspiration? Or are we going to make some choices and some decisions to live in our discomfort and to use that discomfort to propel us forward to healing the world? I pray that God gives us the strength when we look up to the mountain. But I pray that we summon that inner resolve to move each of us and our communities and our nation and our world towards reconciliation. And if we do that, then we will do our part, each one of us, consistently over time, to take on racism and to strike it down, and to embrace anti-racism and to lift it up. Struggle on. Stay in the fight. Stay uncomfortable.
Amen.
Don't stop feeling uncomfortable until this systemic racism, this malignant problem in our society is eliminated, is healed, till our world is whole. Stay uncomfortable. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.